Hi everybody, it's Judy. We're about to speak with John Mitchell, who's the CEO of IPC and who's fresh off the heels of a visit to Washington D.C, where IPC is advocating for the electronics industry workforce. Listen in as we discuss the pledge to America's workers and how IPC has joined in pledging 1 million new job opportunities for the industry over the next 5 years. You're not going to want to miss this one. It's like John Mitchell's State of the Union for IPC in the industry. So lean in, enjoy, and I'll see you on the other side. Welcome to Altium's OnTrack podcast, where we talk to leaders about PCB design, tackling subjects ranging from schematic capture all the way to the manufacturing floor. I'm your host, Judy Warner. Please listen in every week and subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, and all your favorite podcast apps. And be sure to check out the show notes at altium.com/podcast, where you can find great resources and multiple ways to connect with us on social media. Well, welcome, John. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really looking forward to this conversation and hearing about all the latest initiatives that IPC is involved in. So thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you, Judy. Appreciate it.
Well, you and I connected earlier this week because I was shocked to see that I knew that IPC had a governance committee out of D.C. and that IPC actually does a lot to advocate for our industry, but when I saw that you guys had actually had a visit to the White House with yourself and a couple of friends I knew, I reached out and was excited to hear how far you'd run industry voice sort of up the power chain in our country. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, first tell us a little bit about you and then we'll jump into the DC visit.
Sure. So you're not alone in that. Most people, when they think of IPC, they think about standards, but we do a lot beyond that as well. So IPC, we do standards. Our focus is on standards, education, advocacy, and solutions. And so maybe just a little bit about IPC in case some of your viewers don't know much about us. But we have nearly 5,000 member locations all over the globe. About 50% are in North America. The rest are scattered in Asia and Europe and just about anywhere the electronics industry is. We've been around for a little over 60 years. I personally have had the privilege of leading the organization for a little bit over 6 years now and enjoying that immensely. In the standards side, we have a lot of volunteers on that front that help us create the standards. On the education side, you'll know we do things like the certification programs. I'm sure we'll have opportunity to talk about that and how, especially as it ties to this White House piece also. On advocacy, we have offices in D.C., Brussels, and also work in Beijing because, when it comes to regulatory or legislative issues, those can actually really drastically impact the electronics industry, which is who we represent as an industry. And we're really the whole industry soup to nuts. A little over a third of our membership are the OEMs or the primes, a lot of the brands that people would recognize, and they're very interested in the design aspects of what goes into the thing. And then you go down the next step and you have the EMS or assembly companies that are putting the devices together, manufacturing those, and we have standards around that front and certification around that front as well. And then even further down you have the PCB companies, and then you have materials, and then the whole supply base that goes into all of that, whether it's pick and place machines or actual raw materials or components and things like that. So we really are trying to holistically represent the needs of the industry and try to help them be successful, which I don't know that IPC can take credit for the success of electronics globally, but we like to help them along the way.
Well, in a lot of ways, you're the glue that holds us all together because we're really, like you mentioned, all those different parts, material science, fabrication, assembly. Sometimes we can get disconnected and you help us have those common standards, and you do kind of give us the advocacy and pull us together. So.
And it's complicated not in just the supply chain aspect, but then you have different industries, whether you're aerospace and military or whether you happen to be doing medical devices or communication devices or automotive or whatever your industry might be, it's all electronics,
Yep.
and so trying to keep that rolling and meet the industry needs, but at the same, and then meet segment needs. So it's a bit challenging,
Yeah,
but it's a lot of fun.
Not for the faint of heart. So back to your DC visit, why don't you jump in and tell us about sort of what launched that, what sort of initiatives in the current administration that sort of launched those efforts? And
Sure. So IPC, as part of our regular business, takes the pulse of the industry. We survey, we talk to people, and we try to understand what are the largest or most challenging issues that the industry is facing. And for some time now, workforce has been top of the list. Trying to find people with the right skills, whether it's engineers. So in one of the IPC studies that we did, I believe it was 64% of those surveyed said they're struggling to find engineers with the right qualifications. And on the operator on the line from operator or assembler side, 66% of them said they're struggling finding the people with the right skills and talents on that front. And so because we do education and have done so for decades, we looked at what can we do to leverage our strengths in this area to try to help overcome this challenge. And so several years ago, almost I guess it's been a little over 2 or 3 years ago, we finished the launch of an investment we've been making to try to provide more online education. We call it our IPC Edge platform. Edge for, gives you a cutting edge, or, it's education, so kind
Right.
of a little bit of both of those with the name. But so we utilizing that platform, we've been trying to launch more and more initiatives. And a little over a year ago, we started something called the Job Task Analysis Committee, or JTA committee. And what that is we've reached out to industry to really understand what are the jobs that are hardest to fill, and then what are the skill sets that are required for somebody who wants to apply for that job. And that's an ongoing effort. I would hope that anybody listening to this podcast, that we'd love to have every company in the organization represented there and participate, because the skill sets that we're trying to train are only as good as the input we get from the industry, because it really needs to meet those needs. Anyway, so we're working on trying to provide training. We're working on trying to make sure it's the right types of skills, et cetera. And then President Trump and his administration launched an initiative, a request, I want to say it was around April or May of this year, in which they said, hey, we want to recognize and get industry to act on behalf of the worker and do more in terms of training and creating jobs and that sort of activity. And we saw that pledge, and knowing everything that we did, we took actually a longer view. We didn't immediately sign on to the pledge. We wanted to make sure we were understanding exactly what we could do on behalf of the industry. And so as we were looking at that, we also had started an effort with our IPC Education Foundation, which is really targeted at looking at individuals who are not yet in industry. So there's an effort to train those who are already here, and then there's an effort to try to get people who want to change into the industry or maybe start afresh, even as early as high schools. And so we've begun some efforts on our foundation to look at those folks who are not yet in the industry, whether they're mostly students, high school students, college students, and that sort of thing. Anyway, we were working with the White House, and as we pulled the numbers together, we said, oh, well, it's very nice. It looks like we think we can commit to, over the next 5 years, 1 million opportunities, it consists of training, it consists of new jobs, it consists of internships and apprenticeships. We call those earn and learn opportunities, as well as some of the existing training that we do. Today in the United States, we certify about 55,000 people per year. And so over 5 years, that's, a little over 250,000. And we wanted to step up our efforts well beyond that. And so we committed to them on the pledge over 1 million. And as you may have seen on the C-SPAN broadcast, they invited myself and invited me, and then said, well, could you bring some people from industry as well? And so we reached out to a place like Calumet from PCB, and they had an individual join us. Same with Zentech and Green Circuits out there in Silicon Valley, and then Summit PCB from in the Anaheim area as well. Yeah. So they all joined us. It's kind of fun. You don't often get invited to the White House. At least I don't. I don't know. Maybe you do, Judy. But it's kind of exciting. So we were in the East Wing. And it's just like it was on TV. You walk in there, it's like, oh, look at this. This is really what it looks like. And for those of us invited, we were invited then afterwards to go out on the White House lawn and see Marine One land. And then President Trump got on that and take off. And so it felt like a scene from a movie there a little bit. So it's kind of, I didn't want to be starstruck, but it was kind of, those movie guys, they're pretty good.
I think we'd all be starstruck, especially Marine One landing in the White House lawn. Yeah, that's very exciting. Well, what's really exciting to me is to see people I know in a photograph at the White House. It's we kind of seem like a little subculture.
Had our little selfie with Ivanka Trump.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, just hanging with Ivanka. So, but. What I loved about that is she's a senior advisor, right, to the president about the workforce. And so it's really exciting to see how it's dovetailing into what the administration is doing, and then to see you guys upping your game. And that's why I wanted to have you on this podcast, is to let people know sort of what's going on in case they missed it. And also what specific things, you mentioned even reaching down into high schools. And so what are some things, like if you are a high school student or a college student, how do you find out about these oddly named jobs? How do you become a robotic operator inside of a, assembly house? Or,
sure.
How do we expose these kids to these careers?
So we're trying to work with the industry to do that, and then work outside of the industry both. So let me give you a little bit of it. So if you're in industry, IPC's created a place that we're trying to get various companies to sign up for. It's called the IPC Workforce Champions. And we've highlighted 5 different ways that they can get involved. One is that job task analysis committee that we talked about earlier. One is an earn and learn program, so internships or apprenticeships. STEM programming, so working with schools in your area to actually create some of that awareness. There's actual donating to the foundation itself, so financial support. And then having an IPC certified workforce are the 5 areas. So, getting your folks certified to IPC. And to become an IPC workforce champion, you basically put in your information about your company, and then you say, here are the 3 we're going to commit to do of the 5. And sorry, my phone just started ringing there. And that's what it takes to become a workforce champion. So that's one way that you can start helping individually as a company create some of that awareness. But the other way is through this foundation. We're working with the certified technical and engineering programs across many of the states here. And so we're trying to get some sponsorships and creating customized badging programs so that if you're a high school student, you would be able to take an IPC course and get a mini certification that says, oh yeah, I know about ESD, or I know how to what the industry is about. So you can go off and possibly get a summer job and go down to the factory and say, hey, actually I can get a nice little job here and learn more about the industry and realize it's not, that whole Laverne and Shirley thing that we grew up with, the dirty factory that, oh my gosh, there's a mouse in the bottle from I Love Lucy or whatever it was. But you're doing really cool stuff now. Mm-hmm. You're working with robotics. You're working with additive technology or 3D printing. You're, some of the stuff you're leveraging ties into AI systems for artificial intelligence. And it's a whole new world. I mean, you can actually eat off the floor. They're so clean there. It's really a whole different world now than it used to be. So we're trying to encourage the industry to get involved in that. We're also trying to go directly to the high schools ourselves with some free sponsored training so that these individuals can actually tangibly and viscerally experience what it's like to work in the electronics world.
Yeah, because to me it's about exposure. I mean, when
right.
I was 12, I didn't say I wanted to go into the PCB industry, you know? And I would say that many people, unless they're an EE, felt the same way. We sort of happened. It was
I was an
journey.
EE, and I didn't say I was going to go into the PCB industry. I was just going to design cool stuff. I didn't
Right.
even know what it was, really,
Yeah,
you know?
right. And so we sort of end up on these kind of windy paths to end up here. So I see that just exposure. So it sounds like a solid plan, sort of coming at it from both ends, right? From IPC, from industry, and kind of having this wraparound where we're coming at it from multiple directions. Now, some of those certifications, so you mentioned ESD. What are some other certifications that you have as part of the EDU initiative? And then we'll roll into all various type of certifications you offer professionally.
So right now, just like we do with our standards and with the JTA, we're trying to make sure that what we're going to be offering to the students, again, we haven't offered it yet, we're offering it in the fall, but we're trying to make sure it actually aligns with what industry needs as well. So the Job Task Analysis Committee, when they're identifying those skills, we're going to be pulling from that. And then we've just recently launched a market research study into the high schools with the educators as well as the students to try to understand what is it that they're looking to. And we're looking to marry the two of those together, and that will be the first, somewhere 3 to 5 different trainings that we'll be offering in the fall in that order. So I expect it'll be things like safety and ESD and electronics 101, but we're waiting to see what the data will show.
Right. So when do you anticipate that the data collection portion of that being complete?
So the first phase should be done here actually in December. And then we're going to be launching follow-up ones as we test. And so it'll be an ongoing process.
I see.
But I expect around, February, March, we should have narrowed down our first courses that we'll be launching, and then be talking with the various high schools that are out there and saying, okay, here's what we're going to launch in phase 1, and getting their feedback on that, and then launch it in the fall.
So I have a question for you. So
Yes.
I imagine we're roughly around the same age. So I have two.
You're 30? Awesome.
Yeah, I'm 29 also.
Well done.
I have 2 adult daughters. One is wired for academics. One is not. But they're both very bright girls. And what role do you think sort of culturally and as parents, we've had this hardcore press on university or die, and now here we are facing a workforce shortage. I didn't take a straight path through college or university, and remember when we used to have shop in school, and we would train even at the high school level for different trades. And so what impact do you think sort of this cultural parental push towards university or die, has sort of had on the workforce? Do you think that's played a role?
I think it's played a role for sure. I think there is an opportunity for people to realize there are really good, high-paying, interesting jobs that require a higher end degree, like an engineering degree, and there are good ones that don't.
Yeah.
And as you can work in a factory and be doing some very technically challenging things and making good money without a degree. And then there's design aspects that you're going to obviously need a degree for and understand all the math, et cetera. So I think the more we can communicate that there are options, and that's part of what we're going to be doing at the foundation as well, is, trying to overcome some of those perceptions. There still is a stigma about saying, oh, I work in a factory. Oh, really? Oh, so well, and we need to overcome that, because these are great jobs. These are great opportunities. And so we need to do a good job as parents. We need to do a good job as employers and that's part of getting that exposure. You're right on when you said, when you experience it, it's a whole different thing. When I go into a factory, there's not black curdling smoke coming out and that I'm, wading through, and I'm, it's not a coal mine type of thing. Coal mines are, but I think that's some of the perception that's out there, that it's this, really dirty thing, and it has changed. There are standards under which people, in an electronics space especially.
There's clean rooms, there's HEPA filters,
exactly.
There's ESD, you have to put on your bunny suit.
It's cleaner than your classroom at school in some of these things.
Cleaner than your kitchen at home, yeah.
Exactly.
So, right.
So there's work we need to do to overcome some of those perceptions, and that's part of the role of the foundation as well, to share some of those updates and some of that visualization so people can really virtually experience it and then get them in a place where they can actually experience it. That's why we're partnering with industry.
Well, we've sort of been alluding to mostly, or I've been thinking about manufacturing-based jobs. And you sort of mentioned something earlier about the need for engineers. So since our audience here is mostly engineers or PCB designers or technicians, what are the opportunities you see for sort of this demographic?
Yeah, great question. So we're working on a study, planning to do a study on that as well, because we're hearing anecdotally that even though you get engineers that might be coming in, they're still not ready for the workplace. There's some gaps there. And so we're trying to understand what those gaps are as well, and we're trying to fill those. One of them specifically is in the design area, something that is near and dear to IPC's heart. We have design chapters all over the world, and we're looking to try to bring more focus onto the design aspects of the business and in terms of engineering as well. So we've talked with a couple of professors who have design courses that are usable by even those who don't have design expertise. It's kind of like the 101 version of design, if you will. And we're launching some of those on Edge and partnering with those professors to do that. We're also talking with many colleges, universities, tech schools about trying to integrate courses like that into their curricula as well, so that people, as engineers are coming out, they actually have a little bit better footing to be more relevant and usable when they first walk into the building.
Right, that it's not going to take them a 6-month or 1-year ramp. One thing we notice here at Altium, because we sponsor so many student teams, is the kids that say work on a FSAE car or a Hyperloop pod, because they get so much hands-on experience, and they have to, source parts, and they have to work with mechanical people on a team, that they really come out, not fully developed maybe, but they are ready to hit the ground running because
they've had some real world challenges and they've known how to respond to that. That's great. Yeah.
And what I've really noticed is that companies hire those kids first. They go looking for teams or students that are in a lab environment where they've gotten that hands-on, so they don't have that long ramp to, true effectiveness in the workplace. So for me, that's been a new thing, coming from the hardware side to come to the EDA side and see all these teams. It's encouraged me, because I say, we're not talking about this in our industry trades right now so much, but I see this whole group of student teams coming up, and the workplace wisely plucking these ones out. So how can we how can we fuel that? How can we...
Well, and that's another aspect. So I talked a little bit about the high school side of the Education Foundation. There's also a college side where we're looking to have university chapters at several institutions and colleges, and then have a sponsor where they sit there and they go, okay, we have this real world problem, and we'll have a contest to see which university team can actually solve it the best. And so I think it'll accomplish very similar types of things at that level also. But you're right, getting that experience, whether it's through a design course early on, or through a competition, or through some sort of challenge, really does make a difference. Because when I was at Bose, and I used to interview thousands of engineers, and many of them just fresh out of school, it's the stories that make a difference. So if you can sit there and say, share with me a real challenge that you've experienced, this gives them the stories. It gives them the experience where they can say, well, actually, we ran into this problem, and here's how, and you can see, okay, now I know how I can apply that to my business situation. That's the person I want to hire.
Yep,
so
absolutely.
Those are great things for people looking for jobs.
Yeah, I was talking to this one really neat kid. Actually, it was the team lead for the Warloop Hyperloop team in Munich, Germany, and he was saying that the theory is invaluable. They needed all that theory, but being on the team and having the sponsors really enabled him to actually practice it, to put it into practice. And I'm sure here they are. They got to meet Elon Musk. They got to travel from Munich to LA and be on the grounds of SpaceX. I mean, these are life-changing events, and I'm sure these kids will go on to do great things. So,
I had a professor in college. It was my senior year. I think it was Dr. Archibald, and our final. I used to talk about this all the time. It was great. We were given 7 problems, and he says your team is gonna have to present on one of them. I'm not going to tell you which one, so you can prepare for one and hope you get lucky, or you can prepare for all of them. But you're going to get graded on your presentation, and then you're also going to get graded as you ask questions of all the other presentations. So it shows you were prepared. This was the closest to a real world. You develop as teams. You present you work on problems as teams, and it was so. My hat was off to him for he really prepared me to moving into the to the industry. It was great.
And also a couple anecdotal things that I noticed that I'm encouraged by is Eric Bogatin is now teaching a course that includes PCB design, including manufacturing and assembly at Colorado University. So he and his cohort have actually written a curriculum, and I'm also seeing universities reach out to us to say, what can you help us with, or a lot of the things we have are tool related, but we're trying to just give them the basic ABCs of designing a board, and putting that theory to work. So there's these little anecdotal things that I see springing up, and I think what I'm encouraged by with IPC, because the power of IPC, because it's a large global community. There's a lot of power and strength there that if we can, come together as a community globally and do this, I think we'll do a lot of good. So I'm excited about that.
That's right. It really takes the industry to back efforts like this, and it's going to help the industry. So it's actually in everybody's best interest to participate, whether it's in a JTA committee or, sponsoring a team or reaching out to your local school, whatever it is, we need to get active in it.
Yep, agreed. Something that's coming up here, I'm going to segue now to some of the things that IPC offers that support the industry at large, and I think you're going to involve STEM students. This is the IPC Apex Expo that's coming up, I believe, in January, right?
Yeah, it's the end of January, and it'll be in San Diego. And this is really the premier North America industry event. So we have thousands of people showing up. It's a 3-part show. So there's the expo, which you get to experience some of the latest and greatest technologies that are available from the exhibitors there. Then we have our standards committee meetings where lots of volunteers come together to work on those standards. IPC, even though I talk about us doing standards, education, advocacy, and solutions, the standards, IPC doesn't write the standards. We really rely on the thousands of volunteers to put their best knowledge, to bring their experience to develop the standards, because it's for them. We really just shepherd the process. And so this is one of those key times that that process happens. A lot of face-to-face meetings happening there. These folks, they're so dedicated. I mean, oh my goodness, they're there at 7 a.m. on Saturday. Some of their committee meetings is starting as early as that, and they go the entire week, as opposed to the show, which is from like Tuesday morning till Thursday afternoon, and everybody they're working 3 times that hard. So just great efforts by that. And then the third part is a professional development. So there's training that goes on. You get to learn from guest lecturers about what the latest discoveries they have, technologies, how they've overcome problems. It's the whole professional development curriculum. So yeah, Apex Expo, be there. We're looking forward for everybody coming out. It's a wonderful industry event, and I think we actually have maybe the CTO from Tesla being one of our keynote speakers as well this year. So
ooh, that's exciting.
Yeah, so it's lots of good fun.
So I think you mentioned to me too that and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think last year you had sort of a group of high school students coming through and getting some exposure there. So
so we have a STEM outreach program. That last year was the first year we did that. We had over 50 students come, and we're looking to hopefully double that this year, have more than 100. So if you have a school in the San Diego area that would like to participate, reach out to myself or anybody else at IPC and say, hey, we've got a group that's interested. One of them had a robotics club that they came out. They watched the legendary David Bergman show them how to make a printed circuit board out of a peanut butter sandwich, which was kind of hilarious. But illustrating the points, it was a fun activity. And sponsors were there. They got gift bags and some books and some swag and things like that. So and then they got tours of the industry, which they were like, nothing better than seeing the kids' faces just kind of lighting up as they go, wow, I had no idea that this kind of cool stuff. Again, back to the point you made about get them to experience it.
Absolutely.
So that's part of the show as well.
Well, I remember seeing that with the students, and that was really heartening. And I agree with you. I think a lot of us in industry have been reaching to college and universities, but I think we really need to catch that interest earlier at high school these days. So I'm really excited about that program. Now, something that I'm very passionate about and have been part of for many, many years is the IPC Designers Council. And, there's times where it's booming. There's been seasons where it's booming, times where it's lagging. And it kind of went in a little bit of a lag area. And it sounds like you have plans to revitalize it. So can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, and you're exactly right. We're looking forward to offering more support out to our various design chapters that are, as I mentioned, across the globe. And we're trying to do that by both preparing people by offering this one-on-one program. We're looking at on the CID and the CID Plus, those training programs as well, we're not revamping, but we're making sure our training programs across the board are more robust. And so the CID and CID Plus will be going through that same type of industry review to make sure that it's as relevant today as it should be, and complies with international standards. And as a standards body, of course, we want to be compliant with standards. So the designer role is one that is often overlooked. People just assume that that'll just happen, but there's really a lot of intelligence and expertise that needs to go into that as it's developed. So you've got it right on. We're looking to do a lot more in revitalizing and what is it? I just want to
revitalize.
Squirt a little bit.
I think is
revitalize.
Yeah. Well, I've been lucky enough to live here in Southern California, where Scott McCurdy hosts the largest chapter in the globe, but for sure in the world. And he loves those bragging rights. But I serve on that committee and have for many years, as well as the one in San Diego. And then, forgive me for bragging, but, wherever I can find them, I support them and, send them lunch or a speaker.
That's great.
Or whatever,
Thank you for that.
Yeah, just to be of support to anytime designers get together, good things happen. So,
that's right.
So we like to support that here. We touched on it a little bit, but I'd like you to expand on this a little bit. We just have a couple more things to touch on. Is the role that IPC standards play, the role they play globally? I mean, they're very, very far-reaching, and sometimes I think that's lost on us. We just quote this, IPC 610A, blah, blah. But it's like the amount of work, like you said, and discipline that go into creating them, but then, again, the reach, because, right, don't you have to line up with, say if it's telecommunications, FCC, right, or FDA, or military standards. It's, it has to all nest together. So what is the overall role, if you were to summarize that?
Yeah. So IPC standards, we like to say that basically 85% of all electronics created across the globe at some point will touch at least one IPC standard. So it is an important role. And it's important because there's consistency. There aren't a lot of completely self-contained companies that start with design and will create the entire product soup to nuts. So you're communicating with partners, and it's a global world. If I have somebody in South America building a board for me, and then somebody else taking that board in France and populating it and then shipping it over. So you've got to make sure you're all talking the same language, and standards is that common communication language. Mm-hmm. Most of the standards organizations that I encounter globally, they primarily just do it in English. We've found that because we want to make sure that there's not as much barrier to standards, mm-hmm. Our most popular standards will provide in as many as 20 languages.
Wow.
So like you mentioned, the 610. So if I'm sitting here in France and I have a problem and I'm working with a supplier that's based in Mexico, and they have somebody else that's doing maybe another subassembly somewhere else, we can all open to page 6-48, and it is laid out exactly the same. You can say, okay, it's the second figure, and the paragraph is written in their own local language, but everything is positioned the same way so that you can foster that kind of communication better. And that's the role that IPC does on that, but the content is really the role of the industry. And the more people can get involved, the better. And it's not just, if you're listening to this and you don't have gray hair, that's okay. We actually want your participation in these standard committees. Show up the first time, listen, and then if you've got something to add. We want as many people participating as possible. You don't have to physically fly there either. We have virtual meetings that take place, depending on the area of the standard you're interested in, monthly, sometimes every other week if there's a press, on a particular issue. The other thing that's changed about standards recently is when I first came on board, I had many of the industry come to me and say, look, John, we love IPC standards, but frankly, they're coming out every 5 to 6 years, and the electronics industry moves a little bit faster than that. Now, you can't get too much faster than that because then you're building to a standard that's changing, but we've been able to work with the industry and meet that need that they've expressed, and now for the most popular standards, they're coming out every 3 years, which is great, and allows, and we have updates coming out actually every year on some via addendums or amendments to them. So we're trying to make sure that the standards, that the electronics community has the standards they need in the time frame that they need them. So yeah, a lot going on in standards. It's really the core of what IPC does.
Yeah.
Yes,
I think
education,
most people think of IPC, I think the first thing
think of
is
standards.
Yeah.
That's right. And so we take that same type of mentality and we're bringing it to the education space as well in terms of the JTA. It's just like a standards committee. It's let's bring the expertise from across the industry together and figure out what the right skill set is, and then develop it with the industry to make sure that people who pass that are actually going to be helping the industry and have real skills that they need, not just something that somebody in some corner dreamt up.
This is great news. Well, one thing, I think I shared this with you before, our probably mutual friend Mike Creedon, when people try to take pot shots at IPC, for one thing, maybe their standards don't come out as quick as they want or whatever, Mike Creedon is always quick to step up, and he says IPC is a us, it's not a them. So if you're having a problem, step up,
That's right.
Because if you want it to be better, you can affect that. And so that's something I appreciate too.
As you shared earlier, it's not IPC isn't a them, it's an us, and it really takes the entire industry. As I travel around the world and I visit various companies, and some of them are members companies, some of them aren't, and I ask them, so how are you using IPC standards, or do you have any challenges with IPC standards? And they'll go out and they'll get the person, their designer, or there's somebody working quality, and they'll say, yeah, actually I've got a question on this table 3-15B. I'm like, okay, tell me what your question is. And honestly, I'm not going to know the answer most likely, and that's perfectly acceptable because it's an industry standard. But I said, so how have you tried to, he said, well, when we talk about this with one of our suppliers, they think it's this, we think it's that, and occasionally they have these confusion areas, and that's understandable. So, okay, great. Are you on the committee? Well, no. Why aren't you on the committee? Let me put you in touch with the chair of the committee, and let me put you in touch with our facilitator who's on IPC staff, so that you can bring these issues to light and say, this is where it's a little unclear, and guess what? We can get a revision done so that the next time it's more clear for everybody and you can get an immediate understanding. So you really need to get involved.
I know.
If you
I
have a
love that.
challenge with that, you need to go out and, hey, there's no barrier to you being part of this this actual solution that you're utilizing.
Good point. The last thing I wanted to touch on with you was about all the stuff that you've been producing over the years. I've sort of lost touch, actually, is all the virtual education. So yes, IPC, Apex, and in-person things, but what type of things that are available online right now?
Sure. So when it comes to education, people learn in different ways. And so we have partnerships with a lot of certification centers all over the world, and those are very important mechanisms, and they do a great job supporting us. For other people, there might be different pieces that they can learn on their own and maybe shorter courses, et cetera. And so we really ascribe to a multimodal learning methodology. But on the online front, we've taken, so many, many years ago, long before you and I were born, there was the time when they actually used to do things that they weren't online. Can you imagine? It was incredible. But we used to do courses that we sold on, or training pieces that we sold on VHS, and then it moved to DVD, and now we offer some of those same courses or updated versions of them online. And then as we understand more and more what the industry is looking for, we are offering more and more of that available online. So there's subscription packages that we're looking to offer where you can, we'll actually be able to plug some of this right into your current LMS system if you have one. If you don't, we have one that you can utilize as well. So it's really about offering what the industry has shared with us they need. And then as new things come up, like on this education platform, so like the JTA piece that we were talking about, let's say we have a shortage of inspection operators, inspectors that work on the line. Well, we're working to define with industry what the qualifications are, what those skills are, and then we'll work to create courses around that are stackable. So you might start off with a general operator certificate and gain the skills on that, and that might take you a day or two of training online or in a certification center. And then say you actually want to move and you look down the line, you see your friend there who's an inspection operator. Well, I like what they're doing. Now you don't have to relearn everything. It's just you can look at what the next pieces are, and then you can maybe move to quality assurance or to whatever. And so we're looking to develop stackable credentials so that the industry can both get people outside of the industry, but also can, with some assurity, be able to test what people know and drive the actual skills that are going to be helpful to them in the job work, not just something that's esoteric, if you will.
Right. Well, this has been a great discussion. Thank you so much for taking the time to have it. I'm excited to share it with our audience. The last question I want to ask you, again, being mindful of our audience, some are college students, some are young engineers, some are gray-haired old pros, variety. But, you've just educated us a lot about all the variety of things that IPC is doing. Would you just take a moment to speak to designers or engineers specifically on maybe a couple things they could do short term to engage in a more meaningful way with IPC?
Sure. So if I'm thinking about engineers or designers and how they can engage with IPC, first, if you've already had some experience and you haven't had a chance to look at like the CID or CID plus certifications, that's one way you can engage. It's actually credentialing your design capabilities. And so that would be one way. If you have at least 5 years of experience in the industry, that would be one way. On the other side, if you are in school or just barely started and you're looking to gain that type of design experience, there's brand new design training programs that are out there that can get you that leg up, that can get you that real world experience. And then the last thing I would offer is on the standards front, get involved in a design standard. Start listening to those who are the real experts out there. If you have a design chapter near you, get involved, show up at the meetings, learn from these, find a mentor. Nothing better in the world to help you learn faster and to advance more quickly than to find a local mentor, and IPC members make up some of the best mentors in the world.
And you don't have to be the smartest person in the room to be on these committees, which I find encouraging, right?
We're all the smartest people in the world in our own way.
Yeah, that's right. Right. We all bring value.
Experience. That's right. You have different experiences that are valuable.
Well, thank you again, John. This has been fabulous. And again, congratulations on all the fronts you're attacking simultaneously. I don't know when you sleep, but kudos to you. Thanks to IPC for all they're doing on these multiple fronts. And I'll look forward to hopefully connecting with you at IPC Apex. And we'll be sure to share with our listeners all the links to the different things that we've talked about. Sandy Gentry's already sent me a long list of things where people can look into more of these programs that we've discussed. So thank you again. Hope to see you soon. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Appreciate the invitation. Thank you very much, Judy.
Thank you for joining us today on the OnTrack podcast. We look forward to for you to join us again next time. Until then, remember to always stay on track.